Hello, everybody. It's Brian here, and I am going to resurrect something I started in July of 2022. I made a video back then called Five Records from Toronto Artists, and then I did a part two in November. So it's been over a year since part two, and I thought I would just choose five more and maybe have something interesting to say about these bands or these records. So I'm going to start with a record I showed before in a different video, but I can't remember what I said about it. And it's from a band called Platinum Blonde, and this is a record called Standing in the Dark. They were formed in Toronto in 1979, although Mark Holmes, the singer, is actually from England. This is the back of it. I don't understand the door and the piece of furniture or this guy sitting up there, but who knows? You could probably judge the music from this outfits and their hairstyles. It's kind of like a new wave band with some pop rock influences. In the earlier days, they were a bit more punky. In 1983, they released a mini album actually with the same title, same cover, and then they expanded it to a full length album later. So this is the full length record. But their first release was actually in, as I recall, 1980. They released a single. When they performed in the early days, they would do a lot of cover versions of bands like, Gary Glitter songs, what else? The Police, and Mark Bolan songs, I think. The first single, by the way, came out in 1980, and I was looking it up on Discogs, and one is for sale now for $1,100, but in the past they've sold from anywhere from $700 to $1,500, so quite a valuable thing. I've never seen it before. So they had a pretty big impact here because they were one of the bands that benefited from music videos. So we had Much Music in Canada, unlike MTV in the States. And they had three tracks that were played pretty nonstop on those programs. Doesn't Really Matter, Standing in the Dark, and Not in Love, for sure. Those were played a lot. And I think the observation has been made that had it not been for music videos, they probably wouldn't have been as popular because they had very slick, polished videos that appealed to a lot of people. By the next album, which I also have, they were more in the pop rock thing. Any sort of new wavy elements, I think, were gone by then. In 1983, they played a free concert at Nathan Phillips Square in Toronto, which is the public square in front of Toronto City Hall. And 25,000 people showed up, and 40 of those ended up in the hospital. I guess they were, I don't know, crushed or something. They were one of the biggest selling bands in Toronto, in Canada around that time, '84. Even behind people like Rush, but they were really huge. They toured with Bryan Adams and Billy Idol. This is the inner sleeve, and here we see them, actually an image of them on TV because that's really where they made their name. So I kind of lost tracks. I think Mark Holmes is still involved with them, but he's the only original member left. Interesting, but not my favorite band, but kind of an interesting thing about Toronto. Number two is a band called Boys Brigade. There's no apostrophe in boys, so you don't know if it's like one Boys Brigade or several Boys Brigade, whatever. Interesting cover image. This came out in 1983, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but it was produced by Geddy Lee of Rush. So I've already mentioned Rush twice today, so that's funny. The most famous member of this band, by the way, their claim to fame was that they entered a talent show on a classic rock radio station called Q107 in Toronto, which still exists. They're less classic rock now. Well, they are classic rock, but they've put in some. It's really weird. They have a really weird format, which I haven't quite figured out yet. But they had a homegrown contest, and Boys Brigade entered that, and they got some fame out of it. Now, as I was saying, the most famous member of this band was, no question, it's Malcolm Byrne. So I think people should know about him. He became a really well-known, or is a really well-known producer and musician. So the Wikipedia entry has a long list of acts that he was involved with. For example, he produced Emmylou Harris, Patti Smith, Blue Rodeo, a Canadian band called Blue Peter, Midnight Oil. In fact, the record Breathe, he plays guitar, organ, and bass, and also mixed it and produced it. And he performed on some Daniel Lanois records. He also appears on Bob Dylan's Oh Mercy. So a really interesting guy. He had a solo career as well, but maybe now is more known as a producer and guest musician than anything. But This album had a couple of really big tracks up here, "The Passion of Love" and "Melody," which I think are actually really good. And then this is I think the only thing they ever did. This is the inner sleeve. So I don't know how they got Geddy Lee to produce their record, though. A debut record produced by Geddy Lee is pretty interesting. Third thing I chose is a band called the Diodes. This is called Action Reaction. Action/Reaction. Came out in 1980. They were either new wave or punk, depending on when you listen to them, I suppose. Their first gig ever was opening for Talking Heads. I've read that, and they played at CBGB's. I actually love this record cover. There was a sort of thread almost started, or sort of started, was in the comic book area, and then Garage Geek did it, and then I think Doug Anderson took a stab at it about guns on record covers, and I almost made a video for that, and this is the one I would have chosen. Here's the back of it. So the funny thing is, this is probably best known for the song Catwalker, which was a pretty big hit up here. I wrote this down because I didn't want to forget it, but in July 2011, the Toronto Star had a contest about best Toronto band ever, and for some reason, this band won, outscoring Rush, Tragically Hip, and other Canadian bands, which I find really bizarre because I always thought they were pretty much unknown. But this isn't bad. There's no printed sleeve, just the Diodes there. Really, enjoyable band. They've had some other hits, and I don't know what happened to them after that. I kind of lost the plot there. Number 4 is a really odd band called The Look People. This is Small Fish, Big Pond. That's James B. He's probably the person you might know from this band, but this came out in 1990. Sorry, they were formed in 1985. This came out in 1990. They're a quirky band. Kind of like a parody band, alternative but funk metal in some ways. James B. became a radio personality. He was an MC. He published a book called Cocktail Parties for Dummies at some point. This band also features Kevin Hearn, who replaced Andy Cregan, I think, in the Bare Naked Ladies. He also had his own band, Kevin Hearn and the Thin Buckle. He is also a member of the Rheostatics now, and Kevin Hearn was part of Lou Reed's touring band starting in 2007. There's actually some interesting Lollapalooza footage of him playing with Lou Reed's band back then. It's kind of cool. They later became the house band for the Ralph Benmergui Show, and I'm going to take a little digression since I mentioned that, because the Ralph Benmergui Show was this really weird late night, I think it was on CBC talk show, I guess in the vein of, well, entertainment, but also I guess trying to do something like late night U.S. television without success. And at one point, their guest on that show was Leonard Cohen. They were trying to resurrect the show, and they brought on Leonard Cohen to get the ratings. I happened to be in the audience for that show. I got smuggled into the sound check, so I was in the lighting booth and got to hear, because I knew someone who was in the lighting booth, and we watched the Leonard Cohen and the house band do, I don't know if it was this band or not, but I'm just taking a wild digression here. They did 3 tracks, and then I was in the first or second row when the show was filmed and got to see Leonard Cohen in the interview, so that was really cool. A highlight for me. Hard to read the songs in here, but some of their songs from the Look People are really kind of comedic. One of the songs they're famous for is a track called Lousy Lover, which is hilarious. But on here we have Lovely Samba Chicken, Sunday Driver on a Saturday Night. That's really funny. They do a cover of King Crimson's 21st Century Schizoid Man. Then the big track on here was Guido. It's hilarious. There's also a track called Don't Quit Your Day Job, in which they just read the lyrics they got from Doug Chappelle from Virgin Records, saying you aren't good enough to be in our record label, and then they write a letter back and they read it on the air on this thing. It's kind of weird, but a very interesting band. But obviously long gone now. Other members here were Greg Bob Scott, if I'm getting that right, and interesting. So number 5, I went for a more modern band that was formed in Toronto in 2012, and that is July Talk, and I think they'd fit into the indie rock I don't know if you'd use the word new wave, but there's two singers here. There's Peter Germanis and Leah Faye Goldstein. They're quite a contrast because she has your sort of very nice, polished, soothing female voice, and his voice is really kind of a really rough baritone. He's kind of a guy that you wouldn't expect him to sound like that if you saw a photograph of him. Which is there. Everything they do seems to be in black and white. All their videos are in black and white. I think all their albums are in black or white. His favorite singers though are people like Paul Westerberg, Bob. No, he didn't. Not Bob Dylan. Leonard Cohen, Johnny Cash, Tom Waits, Nick Cave. So he's got a very interesting voice. And this, I think this won a Grammy Award. If you want to get a sample, check out the video for Guns and Ammunition. They both sing on it. It gives you a sense of what his voice is like, what they sound like. Kind of an interesting band. I think they have 4 records now. I think there's 4. And a pretty good band. I kind of like them. That's it. See you later. Talk to you next time.